Welcome to another DIY project aboard Maunie. As you've probably realised by now, boat ownership is fun sailing interspersed by a lot of maintenance jobs, and some of them are sort of needs me jobs and some are sort of self-inflicted improvements, and we're about to start on one which is pretty much definitely the latter. Maunie is still rocking her 25-year-old Autohelm system, which was originally put in when the boat was built. So what we have here on this screen is a device that will show GPS. It'll show us time, average tide, time, number of satellites, and lat and long. Next to it is the Autohelm autopilot control system. So what we can do here is from down below we can steer the boat plus or minus, and it'll show us that we're on standby at the moment. And then this one here is a multi-display, so you can show depth, sea temperature, we can show log, we can show the heading, and we can show the true wind speed. So out here we've got another set of instruments which pretty much replicate the same thing, and the idea of these is that the helmsman can see from the helm, but actually we're quite a long way back from the helm, so you have to have reasonably good eyesight to spot them. Now in theory we could have just kept the whole system as it was. It was working okay, although we occasionally had some odd glitches, but what we have here is sort of first generation instruments which run on something called Seatalk, connected into much more modern kit, the autopilot and the plotter, which operates on something called Seatalk-ng. And to make the two things talk to each other, there's a clever sort of converter which does the conversion of one language to the other. But we've got a kind of an old network of cables around the boat, and of course if one of these units fails you can no longer replace the individual units because they're well past their use by date. So the plan is, whilst we've got the boat and whilst we want to carry on using it, invest now so we get the benefit of better instrument displays and also hopefully better reliability. But we should actually be able to sell some of the old kit to people who've still got old units which have failed. So it's a good use of time, and hopefully won't be too difficult. But of course, being a boat, to get at it we have to take all the headlining down above our head here. To get at the wires we have to chase through new wiring, but hopefully the system will be a bit simpler to fault find as well once we've got the whole thing set up. So compared to the old LCD displays, the new Raymarine kit, which is taken over from Autohelm, are much better in terms of visibility, and they do a lot more things. And we've sort of moved towards them because although the original backbone of the boat are the old 25-year-old Autohelm systems, we've actually added in some new Raymarine designs as well. So this is the autopilot control, which gives us not only the ability to change the direction of the boat, but it allows us to set up different readings. So we've got depth, we've got wind speed, and speed over the ground here, as well as a visual representation of our heading and where the wind's coming from. And this is the newer technology now, so much sleeker colour, much nicer to use at night because the background lighting is much more easy on the eye. And so this has been something we installed back in about 2017 when we were in New Zealand, when the old autopilot system failed, and so we've started the process really. So we have some expensive boxes of goodies here, and what we're going to do, because these new instruments are much clearer to view, is we'll actually reduce the number of instruments here in the cockpit from 4 to 2. So what we'll end up with is one of these, which is the new i60 wind indicator. We'll replace this one, and then an i70s, which is a multi-display. It'll show you can configure it to really whatever you want it to show. We'll replace the SOG, COG, depth and speed that are currently on these other ones. So we'll just end up with two instruments here with a blanking plate to hide the hole where the other one came from. So down here, the three instruments will be replaced by our single P70S, which is the same controller as the one in the cockpit, which is the autopilot controller. And again, we can configure the screen to show lots of other information. So together with that and what's on the chart plotter, we can get all the information we can get from these instruments on the two bits of kit. Most owners would probably hand this job over to the experts, but what we've discovered here is that A, there aren't that many of them, B, they're very busy, and C, they're very expensive. So I reckon that this is potentially a DIY project, but I did pay for a local marine electrician, a guy called Chris Rothwell, to come aboard for an hour, and we sketched out a plan of what I thought we were going to do, and he was hugely helpful, and he came with a few modifications, did a proper drawing for me. And he supplied the bits cheaper than I could buy them directly online as well, which was great. And I know that I've got him, if I get stuck I can call him in to help troubleshoot, but at least I can do all the kind of relatively time consuming projects sort of pulling cables through and fitting the units and so on, and I'm hoping I can do it all myself. But the first stage of the process is unfortunately I've got to get at the wiring, which means getting all of this headlining down. The scale of the challenge is becoming apparent now. So as you can see, we've got a whole bunch of apparently identical wires crossing the upper side of the cabin roof, and going back here, this little area here, if I can find and zoom in, is the back of the instruments with all their cables. And not only have we got cables coming from the instruments, we've got feeder cables which are taking in information such as the output from the wind speed indicator and the depth and speed transducers, and they go back to the instruments, and that's going to change in the new system. So those transducers all go into a separate box on the network. So what I've done is started to label up non-navigation instrument stuff, so for example lighting and so on, so we know exactly what we're going to be doing. And as you can see, it all disappears down this tube to go downwards into the forward cabin, but that's for the next job. So I'm going to carry on getting this roof down, so at least I've got everything exposed, and I can work out what's redundant and what to do next. So we're making progress, but it's fiddly, and you realise little snags. So for example, I need to get this next panel out, and they sort of fit in behind each other, but this one is trapped by this handy handhold pole which comes through here. So I think I'm going to have to unbolt this pole from here and here to remove it before I can get this one out, and so on. So it's there we go, it's all part of the fun. But the thing that keeps me motivated with all this is that if I was paying an electrician, including VAT, I'd probably been paying about £60 an hour. So every hour I do here is £60 saved. So we've got the headlining down. Let's see what's behind this little gizmo.
one of the drivers for changing the instruments was this little device. This was a Raystar 125 GPS receiver, which sat on the top of the pilot house, and last year it died internally, it corroded, and you can't get replacements anymore. So you replace it with the RS150, which, as you can see, is of course bigger and has holes in different places, so adds a new challenge to mounting. But this again operates on the Seatalk-ng system of cabling, which this one doesn't. So this one, if we had to move to this one, we had to change the system anyway. So this was the sort of kind of catalyst, I suppose. In the meantime, when this old one failed, we were using the internal GPS of here, but because it's inside, it wasn't as accurate, and we could see that even when you were stationary, the boat would be apparently moving at 1 or 2 knots around the anchorage. So this will be a big improvement. Go back to having an external GPS receiver to give us much better accuracy of position. So meanwhile on deck, I've used this template to drill 3 holes plus the main hole for the connector. That's the old one, and I've sealed the inside of these with epoxy so that there's no ingress into the balsa lining of the deck there. But it has a waterproof membrane which fits between the unit and the deck. That's our next job. So this is one of the Seatalk-ng. This is known as a spur, and this has a rubber seal on it, and it fits in only on one way, and you push it in and then turn it and it locks, and then that's going to be ready to seal. So I just got to peel off this self-adhesive, and then there's 3 nuts on the bottom to fit. Okay, just bolting down. Perfect. So the old helm instruments have 2 bolts with nuts on the back, whereas this one you have to basically pull the bezel off, which has a seal on it, and then there are 4 screws to remove. So at the back of the wind gauge are these 5 narrow gauge connectors, which are from the wind vane sender from the masthead. So they have a long old run to go through the boat to get to here, and the new version doesn't have that system. That is connected much closer to the mast, so hopefully it will be a more robust system. But anyway, that one's out. We now have no instruments. So it's the end of a fairly long first day, and it may look a bit chaotic still, but actually we've made good progress. So all the old instruments are out. The old wiring, all of this is to be pulled through into the next cabin, and that's all redundant. That's all the old stuff. The new wiring is ready. This is the Seatalk-ng spur, which goes back along and feeds to a connector in beside where the main instrument will be,
So we basically just have two wires, one from the starboard side, one to the port, going into that connector, and then the blue line is what's known as the backbone, and that carries the power and the main communications to the whole system. So we've got the GPS in, and it's wired up, and time for a bit of a tidy up, and then I'll come back and do more.